I guess I met him the year before the midpoint of his life. I met him in 1965 at Wharton. I graduated from Wharton in 1965 with an MBA with a focus in operations research and marketing. Russ screened me for an interview with August Bush III. August was a 28-year-old vice president of marketing at Anheuser-Busch. And he was starting to bring in MBAs, wanted to bring management science into the company. So he went to 6 different schools and interviewed around. I had audited Russ's course. He arrived halfway through my MBA case, along with 9 or 10 came with it. And so I knew where he was coming from, and we hit it off pretty well. He recommended me for the interview with August. Little did I know how important those 2 interviews would be to me. Where I spent the next 36 years at Anheuser-Busch. And I retired in the year 2001 at the age of 60. And I was well off at 60, financially. Why was I well off financially? Well, the stock market. When I joined the company, if you put $1 in 1965 into the Standard & Poor's Index, when I retired in 2001, you'd have $10. That's pretty good, 10 to 1. Jack Welch was at GE. If you put $1 into GE in 1965, in 2001, you'd have $27. That's more than 2.5 times the Standard & Poor's. But if you put $1 into Anheuser-Busch when I joined, when I retired, you'd have $206. Now that's 9 times better than GE, and it's 20 times better than the Standard & Poor's Index. Now why was that? Why did the stock go up like that? Well, it's because our earnings went up. Why did our earnings go up? Well, it was mainly due to August Bush III and his guru. You know, he didn't like the word, but that's what he was. 2 R's. And it's Russ Ackoff. And he soon became my guru in 1975 when I was appointed vice president of corporate planning at Anheuser-Busch. So for the last 26 years, he was my guru too. He made huge contributions, H-U-G-E, big, to Anheuser-Busch. And I just tried from memory to pull a few out. He taught us how to design experiments to measure marketing variables, their impact on sales and earnings. Don't go to intermediate measures like awareness and preference. Measure directly on sales. So we took 4 market areas and we doubled advertising. We took another 4 and we tripled it. We took another 4 and we left it the same. We took another 4 and we went to 0 advertising. Most of us didn't like that very much. But we measured what happened. And we learned that we could save a lot of money. And in the course of saving a lot of money, we were able to lower the price spread between premiums, Budweiser, and pot, and that helped sales go up. It's kind of magical. He taught us to appoint interdisciplinary teams to solve problems. Not just a marketing team, not just a production team, not just a finance team, but put them all together. How many of you have heard his example about slow elevators? Okay, quite a few. But there's a lot that haven't heard it. It was really good. There was this building that had very slow elevators. And Russ went in with an interdisciplinary team, and the engineer said, these elevators just can't be speeded up. Sped up, whatever the right word. You know, there's not enough on top to allow us to engineer a solution to this problem. So they were very despondent, the whole group was, until the psychologist and the social systems person, I don't know what you would call him, came up with an idea about mirrors. He said, let's put mirrors in the halls and let's put 4 mirrors in every elevator. And sure enough, they started getting letters thanking them for speeding up the elevator. People were looking at themselves in the hall and they were looking at each other in the elevator. He taught us to ask, as far as an acquisition is concerned, ask not what it's going to bring to us, ask what we're going to bring to the acquisition. Because if we don't bring something, it's going to be much more valuable to somebody else than to us, and we're wasting our time looking at it. And he was right. He taught us to appoint dialectic teams. Dialect is a word I've never really understood. But it gets you the pros and cons of the antithesis. You have a big decision, let's say on an acquisition. For example, I was head of international, and I wanted to buy 50% of the Corona company in Mexico, which is named Modelo, Grupo Modelo. And it was a lot of money. It was $1.8 billion. It was a big decision for the company back in 1993. So I had to go up against a dialectic team, and they recommended that we not acquire 50% of Corona. And they had the same number of people, just as good disciplines. They had the same amount of time to make a presentation. I had to make a presentation to the strategy committee, and then after that to the board, and in both cases, had to beat, there was a vote afterward, had to beat the dialectic team. So fortunately, we bought 50% of Corona, and it turns out nowadays it's worth around $13 billion. So it was one of the better decisions that the company ever made. But boy, we really sweated over it. He taught us to ask the question, what have we learned? What have we learned? As you know, we only learn from mistakes. Somebody here already pointed that out. He got very frustrated, any of you that knew Russ. If he had done a study 8 years earlier, and we were redoing the study today, he would really get angry about it. Because he said, we already know the answer to that. Let's go to something else. What's the matter? Doesn't this corporation learn? So we put in a system of capital audits. So when a division came in and recommended a new project at 32% return on investment, 5 years later, after we voted yes, the finance group would come in and they'd audit the project and they would say what the actual return was. And if it was different, negative, what did we learn? So that next time this division head comes in with something, he's going to have a problem, or the next time we see a similar situation, we don't fall into the same trap. He taught us that we need to communicate clearly, communication to all the stakeholders of a company. So he had August the 3rd flying around to all the birds, talking to the 7 o'clock shift, talking to the 4 o'clock shift, talking to the 11 o'clock shift, talking to all the staff workers in a brewery, same thing in headquarters. He had me flying to England, doing it with our brewery over there, China. He had all the division heads doing it if he couldn't do it himself. And it really made a difference. People knew what we were all about, the kind of problems we faced, what our corporate objectives were, and how they could help. Yes. He taught us the importance of a systems approach. How many of you have heard about his automobile? Russell's automobile. I'm about half. Well, it's a great example. He says, okay, let's say you wanted to optimize cars and you got the best carburetor in any car, and let's say it was an Audi, and the best brakes, let's say that was a Cadillac, and the best fuel pump, maybe a Mercedes, et cetera, et cetera. You put them all together and the car won't run because it wasn't organized as a system. You tell that again, yeah. I wish I had $1 for every time you tried.